Welcome to the Mayo Clinic Human Optimization Project, where we're creating the blueprint to help you become the best human you can be so you can give your gifts back to the world. I'm your guide and fellow optimizer, Christopher Camp. Work-life balance is a term we hear almost daily, and although the phrase is intended to help us successfully juggle our many responsibilities, we really only hear about it in the context of struggle. So the constant striving for work-life balance can leave us exhausted and unfulfilled. So that begs the question, should we be looking at this in a different way? Our topic for today's session is the struggle with work-life balance and why work-life integration may be a better solution. Our expert guest is Dr. Andrea Tooley. Andrea is an associate professor of oculoplastic and orbital surgery. In addition to treating patients, she's heavily involved in research, having published over 90 peer-reviewed manuscripts. She was recognized by the Ophthalmology Power List as a rising star in 2017, won the Emerging Leader Award from Women in Ophthalmology in 2019, and won the AAO Secretariat Award in back-to-back years in 2020 and 2021. She's passionate about education, was the co-host of the Mayo Clinic Ophthalmology podcast, lives on a hobby farm, is an avid gardener, and is crazy busy living a very fulfilled life with her beautiful family. The three big questions that we're going to answer for you today with Andrea are, number one, what is work-life integration and how is it different from work-life balance? Number two, why do we all struggle with this concept of balance in our lives? And then for our third question, we're going to talk about what we need to do to change our thinking and our actions to create work-life integration that leaves us productive and fulfilled. Well, Andrea, thank you so much for joining us on the Human Optimization Project.
Yeah, it's my pleasure. I'm happy to be here.
Yeah, I'm excited to dive into this one. I know this is one that obviously we read about, we talk about, we think about. This is a lived experience. I know it is for you. It is for me as well. So I think a lot of our discussion today is like we can kind of talk about some science and things, but a lot of this is just going to come from hard-fought struggles and battles that we've dealt with, and a lot of lessons we've probably learned the hard way,
yes,
I would imagine.
For sure. Yeah. I completely agree.
Okay, so in our first section here, we're going to talk about this concept of work-life integration and how it's different from work-life balance. So why don't we start with some definitions, and can you tell me, what do you think of the traditional definition of work-life balance? What is that to you?
I think as a young surgeon building my career, super passionate about work, and then at the same time, a young mom. I've got 3 little kids, 4, 3, and 9 months, passionate about building my family at the same time. This concept of how do I balance the 2 loves and 2 purposes of my life, being a surgeon and being a mom. And so this concept of work-life balance, it seems like it would be so obvious, but it's something that's always on my mind, and it's something we talk about so much. I do think it almost gives me the ick now because it's such a misnomer, and I think we hear all the time when people talk about work-life balance, oh, well, it's never 50-50, and this concept that you can somehow balance your life where half of it is work and half of it is your whatever life means to you, whether that's family or your hobbies or whatever else it is that outside of your vocation fills your cup, is that somehow it's always even balance. And we know that's not true. And I think it would be a real disservice to just sit up here and say, well, sometimes it's 70-30 and sometimes it's 60-40. And sometimes you're in a season of life that's all work, but sometimes you're in a season of life that's more focused on your life. Like, yeah. We all know that. And it annoys me when people say that. I'm like, yeah, okay, but tell me how to actually do it.
Right.
And so then I think when we get into renaming it and rebranding it as work-life integration, that makes a little bit more sense to me. It's like, how can I do both and be happy and fulfilled in both? And so I think the traditional definition of balance is something that we're all seeking that doesn't really exist.
I think that's incredibly well put, and it has these sort of this confining rigidity to it as well, and it kind of says you have to do it this way.
Right.
You got to get it just right, appropriate proportions, and it's just life doesn't work that way, and I almost worry that because we've introduced this concept of work-life balance with good intention to
Mhm.
try to help us understand these concepts and try to do it and live it out and prevent burnout and, be fulfilling. But now it feels like work-life balance is just another pressure. It's like another thing
Totally.
we're failing at, and so
Yes.
it makes us worse.
100%. I think about this often when I think about my mentors and these really just incredible legends in surgery who did a ton for my field and people I really look up to. And they're all men, and they all grew up in a culture and a standard that was really well suited for their lives, and they crushed it at work, and now they all have great relationships with their kids, they all have grandkids.
Mhm.
But then when you ask them, they say, "No, no, I was a terrible dad," or
Yes.
"I wasn't there for my kids. I missed all kinds of stuff. And if I had to do it all over again, I would never do it like that."
Mm.
And so we don't even have a semblance of what work life balance is. It didn't exist back, 30, 40 years ago. And I think now that the culture has become more accepting, more understanding, and more diverse in what people are after with a career, not just in medicine, but in anything, saying, how can we really support people having stuff outside of their career where maybe 30, 40 years ago it wasn't like that?
Mhm.
So I think we've come a little bit further as a society, but you're right, because now it's like, oh man, now I have to be really good at home and really good at work and
Mhm.
somehow piece it all together. And it is an added pressure.
I can't tell you how many lectures I've sat in. You're probably the same, where we have these people, typically surgeons, in our professional space, they get up at the end of their careers and they're sort of giving you, here are my pearls and my wisdom and life lessons learned
Hmm.
along the way. And they have so much great wisdom to share. But so consistently, I hear this concept of work life balance is really important.
Hmm.
I was terrible at it.
Right.
You should be better, right? It's like, do we have any examples out there of people who are actually doing this well and,
Yes.
and living it? And I think it's really challenging, but I do think it's possible. And
Hmm.
I look at you, I think you're doing it. You may not feel it, but at least from the outside, it looks like you are. And I feel that I am. I've really tried to tap into this. So despite all the negativity around it, I do think it's possible, but I think it's challenging.
Hmm.
And so we'll talk through that a little bit more.
Yeah, I think you and I have both bonded on this sentiment of living with intention. And that's something that we both really try to do. And so maybe I'm not completely succeeding with work life integration, but I am intentional about it.
Mhm.
So I'm always thinking, what's working, what's not working, and how do I tweak it? And so I think that's what we should focus on more. And that's the thing. I thought, preparing for this, I thought, well, what would I want to hear about with a work life balance type talk? And I want real action items, real world. Like, what
Yes.
are people doing? Tell me the secrets, the hacks.
Mhm.
That's what I
Yeah.
want. I don't
Yeah.
want somebody to say, don't feel bad when sometimes it's 70-30. We're done with that.
Yes. Yeah. It's great. And so to our audience, we have lists. So Andrew and I have kind of worked together and planned this out. So we have some list for you at the end that we're going to give you of some steps that you can take, not only to actions that you can do, but also sort of a way you can change your mindset around this that I think will be really helpful. You mentioned earlier that the world is changing, and,
Hmm.
and we do see this. And I think that in the world of surgery and medicine where we've been, you're right, it has been very male dominated historically. And fortunately, we are seeing that change. We still have a long way to go, but we're starting to see some changes. And in that, hopefully, we're seeing some of the traditional sort of male surgeon roles wanting to be more involved at home.
Hmm.
And we're seeing women now being more involved in the surgery space at work. And we're all seeing all sorts of other changes like other industries are. There's a lot more hybrid work and remote work, and the world is different and it is shifting. And most of us don't necessarily live in this space where you punch in, you punch out, your day starts at an exact time, ends at an exact time, you leave work at work, and then you go home. And that's not the world that we live in,
Right.
in this modern time. And so I think that our models for viewing that have to change as well. Has that been your experience?
Oh, absolutely. I think just like you mentioned, everything is changing with what people want and what the expectations are.
Mhm.
And I I've thought about this a lot too under the view of being a woman in medicine, because there's a lot of talk about promoting women in medicine and making the path and the culture more suited for the differences that we have being a woman versus a man. There's just inherent differences. And I think at the end of the day, my general standpoint is that people should be able to do whatever they want.
Yes.
If someone wants to live for work and just work, 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 and never be there for their family, and their family is happy and they're thriving and they miss every track meet and their kids don't care, like, then that's great. That should,
Right.
we shouldn't force any lifestyle upon anyone. And some people, things work in their lifestyle that wouldn't work in others.
Mhm.
And I hope that we're just becoming more accepting of people can do whatever they want.
Mhm.
Something that triggers me a little as a woman in medicine is feeling that we're being held to this standard just in order to make things 50-50. For example, there's publications in ophthalmology, I'm an ophthalmologist, coming out saying, well, there's less women professors, there's less women chairs, there's less women leading clinical trials, less women senior authors, yada, yada, yada. I agree that it's important to shed light on that, but I also think at the end of the day, maybe there's less women who want to be chairs.
Sure.
It
Sure.
if there are women who want to be a chair and the door is closed, then that's a problem.
Yes.
If the door is open and they're choosing other things, I don't think that's a problem.
Mhm.
And I think that we need to celebrate that people can choose whatever they want.
Mhm.
And you don't have to be CEO or chair to live a great life, and you also don't have to have 10 kids. Like, you can do whatever you want
Right.
is my general sentiment with all of
Yes.
this.
I think we do have to be careful in this because obviously there's immense value having diverse people, backgrounds, perspectives at every stage and walk of life, for sure. But I also think we do run a risk if we're trying to just meet quotas to make
Right.
everything 50-50. And oftentimes you may be forcing somebody into a role that they don't want just because I say, hey, you fit this quota
Yeah.
that we're looking to fulfill. And I know you actually don't care about this, but we need to do this to check this box. And so we want you to do it. So
Right.
it is a challenge and it's a fine line. But I think that in order to successfully navigate that, it really requires you to understand what you want. And
That's
so,
the heart of it.
so then when that door open, and hopefully there are people that are actively opening the doors. And then
Yes.
what we want is a world where people can say, all right, I know who I am. I know what I want. I know which doors I want to walk through and which ones I don't want to walk through.
Yeah.
So it makes it very easy for me to say yes or no when that door is open.
Mhm.
So that requires some intentionality, which I think gets us into this concept that you and I have talked about a lot of work-life integration.
Mhm.
So can you tell me a little bit, maybe how do you think about that and define that?
I think that work-life integration is just a slight reframe of balance where you're never all or nothing. You're not in an all work mode or an all life mode, but somehow you're able to blend the two that's working for you in whatever that means. And that's different for everybody. For some people, that's like you mentioned, a hybrid model where you're doing a little bit of work at home, but you're still kind of present with your family, and maybe that works for you. Or maybe you're taking a different work schedule so that you can fit in other work things. So it's somehow blending your life where it's not an all or nothing, but it's letting, I think, a little bit more fluidity into it. And that's what's worked for me, especially having young kids. I found that my kids change so fast,
Mm.
and I have a model that works for about 6 months. And it's like, this is the structure, this is the model, like, this is what time I come home from work, because evenings right now are a little bit higher yield than mornings because my kids are super young and they're asleep in the mornings. But maybe when they're a little older, mornings are more high yield to be with my kids than
Sure.
evenings. And so it's like every 6 months I have to kind of reframe what my kind of daily strategy is going to be.
Mm.
And to me, that's the intentionality. It's being really thoughtful about when is the high yield time with my kids? When is the high yield time for work? When can I fit in the things that are important to me? Fitness is really important to me. When in the world am I going to work out with a new baby and 2 toddlers? Never. So maybe I'll get a standing desk in my office, and I just won't really work out as much right now. But
Mhm.
like other things to just kind of make it all fit to your general goals, and
Mhm.
giving and taking little bit, it's never perfect,
Mhm.
but that's what it is for me. And it's the reevaluation about every 6 months that is key.
And you're giving yourself permission to be flexible here. And
Yes.
so and I like that you reassess every 6 months. What a great trick too, because in doing that, you're saying, all right, I give myself permission to make changes
Yep.
every 6 months.
Yep.
I know that whatever I'm doing right now, I'm not going to stick to it forever. So I'm actually scheduling some changes here. In 6 months, I'm going to reassess and adjust. I also think too, having this better coherence between our sort of personal lives and our work lives is can be really helpful for
Hmm.
us. And a lot of people talk about kind of work life segregation, which is the opposite. Like
Right.
the two should never cross paths, should never meet. And I think for us as humans, that's really challenging to live separate lives that way. And
Hmm.
then I think that the more that we can have some coherence and alignment of our meaning, purpose, and values in our world outside of work and our world inside of work, the better we're going to feel, the more fulfilled we will be, the more consistent our life is,
Yes.
and the more energizing that can be.
Yep. But the coherence and the blending, I think, is really um, interpersonal dependent, and everyone does that so differently. So you really have to know what works for you. I'll give you a couple examples. I don't have my work email on my phone. And so that's a segregation for me. I have no way of checking my email. I'm totally unreachable when I'm not physically at work. I do have an iPad that I could check my email if I wanted to, but it's in a cabinet or something.
Inconvenient.
Yeah, it's super inconvenient. So I don't see my emails at all when I'm at home. And I'm almost 100% mom mode when I'm at
Mhm.
home. And that works really well for me. I don't want to be distracted. I don't want to be stressed about emails. I'm not very good at working or emailing from my phone. I'm much more efficient if I batch it and sit down at an actual desktop, and then I can just knock it out. And so I've made that decision where I'm not going to have my work email on my phone. But I take my kids to all kinds of conferences. I've given podium talks wearing all three of my babies. I'm like the girl with the baby at every single work meeting. I don't do Zooms at night. And if I have to, there's kids in the Zooms.
Mhm.
And so that's a total blend for me. And that's what really works for me. Other people might be the completely other way around, where they can be super efficient on their phone. They don't mind just like knocking out work emails here and there, just in little bits of downtime, and they don't feel like it distracts them from their kids, and it's not an issue. Great.
Mhm.
But it's all about knowing yourself. If I had my work email on my phone, I would be totally distracted from my kids, and I would be stressed about work stuff that does not matter and can definitely wait till the morning. And if somebody needs me, they can call me, and I just don't even worry about it.
Mhm.
But maybe that doesn't work for everybody
Well,
else.
you're talking about outlining some of your non-negotiables here, and I think we'll talk about that in the third section. Where I think
Yes.
in this work-life integration model, there are certain things that you need to say. Okay, this one's non-negotiable. This one's going to stay 100% in the work bucket.
Yeah.
This one's going to stay 100% in the life bucket. I'm not
Mhm.
going to let these things blend. So I think you got to be thoughtful and intentional about how you do that. So,
Yeah.
speaking of that, I do think that there are some potential downsides to the concept of work-life integration,
Mhm.
and that there is no perfect model out there. There's some downsides. So I have thoughts on a few, but I want to hear from you first. What are some potential concerns or worries
Mhm.
if you approach this as a work life integration model?
Well, I think some people get really stressed when they can never turn it off, and they feel like they're always working, the work never ends, and having to keep both on the fire, where you've got some work and some home all the time, can be a lot. You're probably functioning at more like 120% because
Mhm.
so that can be rough if you're constantly doing both. And I think it just depends if on your personality type. Some people are very all or nothing type people, and other people are medium. So, for example, I am a medium person where when I go on vacation, I keep checking my email
Mhm.
because I don't like to come back to a ton
Right.
of stuff. Other people have to completely clock out,
Mhm.
and they will be more recharged if they just completely shut
Mhm.
the computer for a week. And I'm more recharged if I just do a little and stay afloat.
Mhm.
But that's totally personal dependent. You have to
Mhm.
decide what works for you. And there's no rules. So that's why I don't like when people are like, "Oh, well, you should take this many weeks off a year." It's like, "No, you should you should do whatever
Do what
works
you
for
need,
you. Do
right?
what you need."
But underpinning all of this is that you have to know what you
You
need.
have to check in with
Right.
yourself. You have to have some level of introspection to check in and say, "Am I okay? What's working? What's not working?
Mhm.
What am I really overwhelmed or am I doing okay?" And it's funny, we talked about this last time and I've thought about this a lot. I have these moments where I think, "Man, I'm so overwhelmed," or like, "I'm really not okay at this moment." And then this other voice immediately comes in my head and is like, "No, no, you're fine. Come on, like, suck it up. You're totally fine," and
Yeah.
shuts that down. And I have to constantly think, "Okay, am I actually okay?
Mhm.
Or do I really need a minute here?"
Mhm.
And there are seasons in life it's really busy
Yeah.
trying to build your career and having a young family or trying to have hobbies and trying to work out and trying to get enough sleep, and it's a
Yes.
lot that we put on
Well,
ourselves.
I think if we don't do a good job of figuring out who we are, what we want, what our values are, what our purpose and what we're striving for, the work-life integration can be a massive challenge.
Yeah.
And work-life balance, also a massive challenge.
Mhm.
And work-life segregation, massive challenge. So I think
All of it.
no matter what your favorite approach is, if you don't know who you are and what you want and what you're striving for,
Yeah.
you're going to fail.
Yep.
So I think this step one, no matter what approach you take, is going to be okay. Figure out what you're looking for in
Yes.
doing this. But I do think taking this integration approach is certainly going to require you to have a good handle on what you're trying to accomplish and be very intentional
Mhm.
about what's important to you, what's not important to you, and what you want to accomplish. Okay, so let's slide into our second section here. So we're going to talk a little bit more about why we struggle with balance in our lives. We've already hit on a lot of key points, but I think this section will probably resonate with a lot of people. So can you tell me, um, in your, if you don't mind, we'll be a little bit vulnerable. Tell me maybe some of the ways that you personally have struggled with balance in the past.
Oh, yeah. Well, when we talk about balance, I wanted to mention with all of this thought about really intentionally knowing yourself, I think the more work and the more introspection you can do to understand how you tick and what makes you you, the better and stronger of a person you're going to be. I'm really into the Enneagram. I don't know if you
Oh
like
yeah.
the Enneagram,
Mm-hmm.
but I think understanding what core fears you operate from and what are your core drivers and like why am I feeling this way or why am I so resistant to this, it helps you so much. So, I'm an achiever. My core fears are that I'm gonna be, um, unworthy because I haven't performed high enough and no one will love me, and if I just do enough, if I just do everything, then someone will love me.
Mm-hmm.
And so I have to know that about myself, that I'm gonna immediately want be like, "Yeah, I got it." And maybe sometimes I don't got it.
Mm-hmm.
And that is where I can fall victim to this. And what's helped me is giving myself permission to change strategy. The second I get really rigid about like I'm only going to work out in the morning or I'm going to write all these papers, that's when it all falls apart for me.
Yeah.
So giving myself permission to be really fluid and change almost it's about every 6 months I kind of change strategy and course correct. That really helps. And then really asking myself, does what I'm doing align with my goals? Is it getting me to where I want to go? And is it growing and supporting my family?
Mm-hmm.
When I didn't have kids and it was just me and my husband, it was way easier to be all in on work and say yes to all the things. And I think that's a good thing when
Mm-hmm.
you're growing. And I think we sometimes also fall a little victim to this work life balance where we close ourselves off to opportunities because we're scared of working hard. There's nothing wrong with hustling and being a little out of balance for a minute if you're passionate about it.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of people who've had tremendous success and made huge differences in the world and done really great things have been all in on their passion for a certain amount of time, and that's how we all are with medical school or whatever. So there's going to be moments where you're not in balance. And it might be to your benefit to say yes to lots of things, but I've definitely said yes to things that then I did a bad job
Mhm.
for sure, and that's what you really don't wanna do. Or I've just become so overwhelmed and so burnt out that it's been really negative
Mhm.
for me emotionally. I'm like, this doesn't feel good. I'm not performing at my best, or I'm not there for my family the way that I want to be.
Mhm.
So it's giving yourself permission, I think, is the biggest thing. And then really knowing what makes you tick. Why am I doing this just because I want that check mark and because it'll make it's the next achievement, and that's what drives me, and that's what's going to make me feel good? Or am I doing this because I'm afraid of letting somebody down and it's just a people pleasing thing? You have to ask yourself, like, what am I doing, and is it really helping me achieve my goals?
That's great, and I think you talked a lot about checking in with yourself and making sure that you're being your best self. You're not falling into your tendencies or your pitfalls. One of the big mistakes I've made, all of those that you've mentioned, and then one of the other ones is not doing a good enough job of communicating those
Oh,
things with the other people in my life who care about me, whether
mhm.
that's my wife, Erica, at home, or if it's people at work. And sometimes you're right, like, you do have to lean in one direction more than the other, and there's often this tendency to think, well, I'll just do it and take care of it, and not let anybody know, and
Yeah.
I'll just keep going. But then that adds all this extra pressure and extra stress, and the people in your life don't understand what you're dealing with. And I think we see that in both directions. Sometimes work can be squeezing you really hard, and it affects how you are at home,
Mhm.
but you don't tell the people at home, so they don't recognize that. They're not going to give you the grace you need to do that, and vice versa. Sometimes at work, you may feel uncomfortable talking about what's going on at home, good or bad.
Mhm.
And so the people at work are saying, well, why are you underperforming? What's going on here? And it's like, well, I got a lot going on outside of work right now. And so not communicating those things can really harm this as well. And
Mhm.
I've made that mistake in the past for sure. So speaking of mistakes, I think that there are a lot of feelings and emotions that sort of come to mind for people that are striving for work-life balance. And so in your experience as you're talking to people and you're teaching people about this, what are some of the most common emotions you hear people say they feel when you bring up the concept of work-life balance?
I think especially for women and really for moms, it's this whole concept of guilt and mom guilt and work life guilt, where I hear this all the time. And I really hate this whole trope where, I'm failing at work and I'm failing at home. It's so yucky. It's like, can we just stop? You're doing great, but the pressure that we put on ourselves to be performing at the absolute top at work and at the absolute top at home in all the things is so ridiculous. And this is trite. It's the same thing we're saying, you can't fit everything in. So you have to decide and you have to pick and choose because you can't do everything. But you can do everything, but not all at once. And so you have to pick what you want to do. And that's very cliche, but it's so true. And it goes back to being intentional. I think that people who feel really overwhelmed or really guilty about not performing are doing a lot of stuff that they don't have to do.
Mm-hmm.
And we all fall victim to that mentality like, well, I'll just do it. And I don't need to ask for help and I can just do it. And I don't need to outsource this, or I don't need to ask for help and it'll be fine. I'll just take care of it. And then you end up really suffering or not being able to do it and falling apart. So you have to think about what do you have to do, and then what fills your cup, and then what do you really dislike doing, and what is not helping you reach your goals? And I think about that everything with home stuff and with work stuff. If I'm asked to be on a new committee, I'm immediately thinking, does this role help me reach my career goals? Is it in line with my goals? How much travel does it entail? Can I feasibly do it without affecting my kids? And am I going to do a good job? Do I want to do it? And if I say, man, I would love to do this, this sounds super fun, but it actually is not really aligned with any of my career goals, and I'd have to travel a bunch, that's an easy no. Like,
Mm-hmm.
sorry, this sounds super fun, but I'm not going to do it.
Mm-hmm.
And same with home stuff. I talk to lots of people that are so stressed about cooking and cleaning and organizing and shopping for the kids' clothes and sports and school and da 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 da. And it's crazy. It's so overwhelming. So for me, And this is just specific examples for me. I hate doing laundry. I do not do it. I have just put an absolute rule. I refuse. I'm not doing it. I will pay someone else to do it, and I am so lucky that I have the means to do that. But I love to cook. I really, really love it, and that's a something that's super important. It fills my cup. So I cook dinner every night for our family, and that's what I do.
Mm.
But I do not shop for my kids' clothes. I
Mhm.
have no idea where their clothes came from. I didn't buy them, someone did, and I don't put them away or wash them or anything because I just can't. And I have other girlfriends who hate cooking and they outsource all of their food and they love buying their kids' clothes and they know where all of their outfits came from. And that's great. You do whatever you want to do,
Mm.
and you should give yourself permission to not have to do all the things.
Mm.
And I think some of that is more of a female problem.
Sure.
In broad generalizations, I'm not sure if men feel the same. Like my husband doesn't feel guilty about not
Mhm.
knowing where the kids' clothes came from,
Mhm.
but I do. But
Yeah.
I think it's just you have to have those self checks. Like,
Mhm.
why am I doing this? And I was talking to my chair the other day, who is incredible. She's got 4 kids. She's the chair of our department. She's absolutely amazing. And we were talking about, being doing home stuff versus doing work stuff. And she works a lot. And I told her I had a day off. I had a vacation day. And our house was a wreck. I think our housekeeper was out, or maybe because my husband was sick. But, anyways, our housekeeper was gone, our nanny was gone, and the house was a disaster. And I had such an urge to clean and organize the house. And I could have spent all day cleaning and organizing the house, and it would have felt great. And I had to really strongly say, no, I am not going to clean the house. That's not what my vacation day is for. I pay other people to do that.
Mhm.
That is not what my time is well spent doing. I've got 3 manuscripts to edit and I want to go for a run. And that will be a way better use of this vacation day where
Mhm.
I'm not working. I'm going to edit these manuscripts and go for a run and have a nice day and not clean the house. And my housekeeper will come next week and clean it.
Yeah.
And I set a timer on my phone for 30 minutes and I said, I will allow myself to tidy up for 30 minutes and then I'm going to stop.
Yeah.
Because I knew I could have spent all day doing things that actually aren't helping me achieve my purpose.
Mhm.
And that was a win for me where I thought, wow, I'm getting somewhere.
Yes.
I'm doing things intentionally, and I caught myself. I would have spent all day, and then I would have thought, man, I'm so behind on work, and I didn't get to work out. And yeah, the house is clean, but nobody would have noticed or cared.
Mhm.
My husband wouldn't have cared. My kids wouldn't have cared.
Mhm.
And I wouldn't have moved forward with my goals.
Mhm. One of the things that comes to mind for me is you were talking about sort of the guilt and the anxiety that comes from that and the pressure we put on ourselves
Mhm.
to do these certain things and achieve these certain things, or we say, well, I feel like I'm failing at work and at life. I feel like I'm failing at both. I would challenge people that when you have that thought, pause and say, I'm failing based on whose definition?
Yes.
Because I think oftentimes we just say, well, I'm going to look at this definition of success from this person and this definition of success from this person. And you adopt all these different definitions of success, but that person is living a totally different life than you.
Yep.
And they've got such a different situation, a different set of circumstances. And it's really not fair for us to do that.
Mhm.
I think we can look to other people and their definitions of success and use them as inspiration. And maybe they can guide our own definition. But ultimately, we have to do that on our own. And so if you have that feeling of I'm failing at this or that or whatever, immediately pause and say, okay, failing based on whose definition?
Yeah.
And oftentimes you'll find that it's arbitrary. Now, sometimes there are situations where you actually have to do the things. There's some things at work you have to do
Have
to
to do.
keep your job, and you have to feed the kids so they can survive. And so if it's one of those things where you're saying, I have to do this for work, I don't love it, but I have to do it. Sometimes you just have to do it. And sometimes you don't feel like feeding the kids, but you have to do it. And
Yeah.
so there are times when it's not all rainbows and sunshine. You just say, all right, I'm going to just put my head down and I'm going to get through this. But for the most part, I feel like a lot of this pressure and anxiety that we put on ourselves is because we have adopted these external definitions of success.
Mhm.
When that happens, we got to pause and step back and say, wait a minute, what's my definition of success?
Mhm.
And then if you can figure that out, and then you can look and say, okay, but it feels like my definition of success is constantly in conflict with my partner's definition or with my boss's definition or with my coworker's definition. Okay, then maybe I've got a deeper issue that I need to be working on. And I need to sit down with these different people and we need to try to get on the same page and say, I'm looking at this different than you are. Let's talk and let's find some middle ground and let's try to work this out. But I think that we all put way too much pressure on ourselves that's unnecessary and unhelpful. And life is certainly too short for that.
Oh, absolutely. And sometimes it's just about letting go of what you think has to be the perfect version and settling for maybe a slightly less version. Like maybe you didn't get an hour-long workout today, but you were able to do 20 minutes, or maybe you didn't get to make, I'll have a whole week of dinners planned, and by Thursday it's like, oh shoot, I never made I've got
Mhm.
something that's going bad in the fridge that I didn't cook because I haven't had time, and we're just eating leftovers for dinner, but we're still eating a home cooked meal and it's fine. You just got to let it go.
Yeah.
So I think a lot of it too is letting it go. Don't hold yourself to ridiculously high standards. And you got to know that everybody's struggling. As you were talking, I was thinking too, it may seem like we've got it all together. I was crying in my kitchen like 2 days ago, like
Right.
I'm a mess all the time.
Yeah.
And so some of it's just enjoying the highs and the lows and just give yourself a break.
Hmm.
Everybody's a mess. Everybody's struggling. Nobody's got it together. If you think that someone's got it together, you just don't know them well enough.
Yeah.
And
It,
that's certainly the case for
your
me.
your line of just let it go is a good one too, and that's one I really struggle with too. Is I'm a bit of a planner, and so I lay out these plans. I think here's what we're gonna do,
Yeah.
and my wife is great at pivoting when we
Nice.
need to pivot. I'm not so good at it, and so oftentimes she'll help me. She say, "Wait a minute, why are you still hanging on to this plan? Like nobody wants to do this anymore." I'm like, "What do you mean? This is what we're." She's like, "Nobody wants to go to this or do this," and I'm
Sure.
like, "Really?" And she's like, "Yeah, you got to let it go." So that's a common refrain in our house. Actually, we use it for each other's. What does Elsa say? Let it
Oh,
go.
let it
Let it go.
go.
Yeah, a little
It's great.
Frozen reference
It's
for my
very
young girls.
helpful.
Okay, so now let's get into some more solutions. We've sprinkled a few of these in along the way,
Yep.
but I kind of want to get a good organized approach. So let's get into our third section where we're going to talk about some potential solutions. And our third question is, what do we need to do to change our thinking and our actions to create work-life integration?
Well, I think you put me onto this in our last podcast is really having a mission statement for your life.
Hmm.
You mentioned this, and I went home and my husband and I both made our mission statement.
Love it.
We totally did. And really defining and refining your purpose and what is truly important to you and your goals. And I think that people really don't do this enough. I have just a little note in my phone, and I have my 1 year goals and my 5 to 10 year goals. And I refer back to those a lot to think, am I on track? Am I and if somebody asks me to do something, I'll look back at my goals and be like, does this really align with that? And then I'm refining these goals because sometimes my goal is not applicable anymore and life changes and you have to make a totally different outline. But that comes back to the intentionality piece. You have to know who you are, you have to know what is important to you, and then it'll all fall into place.
Hmm.
Because then I think you really operate from a deep sense of purpose, and it makes the no's easier to say no. It makes the yeses more exciting to say yes, and you feel more engaged and more in control, I think.
I love it. And I feel like I say this 20 times every episode, but intentionality, I think,
Yes.
is really the key behind it.
But it's amazing how people let life go by and don't really think about it, and how easy it is to get bogged down in all the distractions. Our whole life is a distraction. And so if you don't really step back and think about who you are, what makes you tick, and what fills your cup, you're going to get filled with all kinds of other stuff.
Okay, so we talked a little bit about how you have to be intentional. You want to define your values and your mission and things. I'd like to sort of split this up now into a couple of lists or models for people to look at. So let's first talk about some of the mindset factors and things that people need to change about their mindset around work-life balance. And I'm going to still, one of the ones that you said I think was great is defining who you are and what you want. So you got to figure out what your values are, your purpose, your mission. You really got to spend some time thinking about that. What are some other mindset things that people need to try to fix when they think about this work-life balance
I think
concept?
The biggest one, the most common one we hear is that it's not 50-50,
Hmm.
but you really got to remind yourself that. And you have to get into the mindset that it's not always going to be 50-50. And you have to be flexible.
Yep.
You have to be able to lean into work when work is all in and lead into home when home is all in.
Hmm.
And well, I've got an action item that I want to put towards that, but it's about deciding how to allocate your time based on how that 50-50 balance
Yeah.
is going.
Perfect, perfect. And another thing too is I think oftentimes there's this misconception that if you divide yourself into work and life, first of all, that's an oversimplification of who you are as a human.
Yes.
Right? We are multifaceted and it's sloppy and it's messy. We all have a lot more identities than just work and life.
Mhm.
So I think recognizing that I'm a little bit more nuanced than just existing in two buckets. That's one. And then if we do think about it, if you think about your life outside of work, if you try to simplify everything into that, there's often this tendency to think, okay, my life out of work, that's where all my joy comes from and my happiness. And so you put a lot of pressure on yourself to think life has to be great all the time.
Yep.
The mindset switch here is that you have to recognize life will not be great all the time. Sometimes it's awful. And sometimes there's situations you can't control and they're terrible. So you have to account for that. And on the flip side, work doesn't have to be miserable drudgery all the time. It's
No.
okay to have fun at work and it's
Yep.
okay to get some joy and meaning from work.
I think that's great.
And I think one more mindset thing I'll add that you triggered me on earlier is when you talked about how we feel like we're failing, that we need to recognize that we have to ask ourselves, failing by whose definition?
Yep.
So don't adopt the definition of success of other people. You have to change your mindset on that and think about the definition, your own definition of success.
Yep.
Okay, so now that's sort of changing your mindset. Now let's talk about changing behaviors or actions.
Hmm.
So you mentioned earlier that you and your husband went out and actually wrote out your values and your mission, which I think is amazing. And
We
so
did.
I'm going to start us off. So on our action item list, I think writing these things down. What are your values? What is your purpose? What are your goals? I think is really, really critical. What are some other actions that you would suggest people do?
Besides getting kind of short-term goals and long-term goals, I think the next thing is, and we're going to talk about making kind of a time inventory, but for me, what helps is really identifying when I have bits of time to devote to whatever it is taking the most time in my life. So usually it's work. And for me, usually it's early in the morning. But sometimes it's fitness and I'm working out early in the morning. And you have to decide, do I have extra time at night or do I have extra time in the morning? And am I going to try to do extra life things? Is that when I'm going to paint? Is that when I'm going to meditate? Is that when I'm going to do fitness things? Or what am I going to cook or study for French lessons or whenever. When is that going to be? Is that going to be early in the morning or late at night or can you go to a yoga class at noon every day? I think it's really just being intentional about carving out little times. And so for me, when suddenly I'm overwhelmed and I've got a ton of stuff going on at work, I start getting up at 4 a.m. and I work from 4 to 6 and I get 2 interrupted hours in the morning and I can get a
Mhm,
lot done
mhm,
in 2 interrupted hours. And
mhm,
if I do that for 3 or 4 days in a row, suddenly I'm back on track.
mhm,
Or if I'm thinking, I'm really feeling tight or weak or whatever, and I want to jumpstart a new fitness routine, maybe that's working out after the kids go to bed. On maternity leave, I started working out in the mornings and it was great every morning because the baby was still sleeping and I was feeling great. And so that was my workout routine. But I think it's really finding those little bits of time. And
mhm.
those are just specific examples.
Those are great. I think so. Taking a time inventory and seeing, all right, where am I allocating my time? But on the same token, you want to say, all right, what are the things that are most important to me?
Hmm.
And then where's the portion of my day where I have the most control? Because I'm going to
Yes.
move them into that portion. Because I know for me, I generally have more control over my day early in the morning.
Yep.
Once the day starts,
It's
stuff starts
over.
happening and I start losing control. So if something is really important, I need to move it into earlier in the day. So do sort of take a time inventory and ask yourself, all right, where do I have the most control?
Hmm.
And I'm going to put the most important things there to the best of my ability. You
Yep.
can't always control that, but I
And
think
you
that's
can
really
get
helpful.
creative too with fitting things in. I hate working out in the morning. I hate it. It doesn't feel good. I don't like it. I'll begrudgingly do it.
Uh-huh.
And I'll do it for a little span of time, but I hate it. And so I'll go in seasons where clinic will allow me to like I'll finish at 3:30 or something and I can go for a quick run here at work before I go home.
Hmm.
But I sometimes, if you get into a really kind of set mindset, like I can only work out at the gym, or I can only work out if it's at home in the morning. Like maybe that's not going to work for you. Maybe you have to fit it in at other little times. And sometimes you have to get really creative about how to make it all function.
Yeah, and that's where I struggle too. So that's where the let it go philosophy, I think,
Yes.
comes back in is really helpful for people like me. All right, I've got two more action things I'm going to add on here that I got from you earlier. One is determine what your non-negotiables are.
Hmm.
So we talk about this concept of work-life integration, but there may be some things that you don't want to integrate, and that's okay.
Yep.
But just be thoughtful about what those are. So figure out those things and say, okay, this is where I'm drawing the line here, and this is where I'm going to draw the line there. And the last one I love is that you said you basically change every 6 months, which
Hmm.
is really good. So you're building in that flexibility and fluidity. So another action item is once you kind of figure this out, set a reminder, say, okay, in 6 months, I'm going to reassess my situation and
Hmm.
probably make some changes because my life is going to look a little bit different.
Hmm.
Okay. Well, this has been a great conversation. I've loved it. I knew I would, and I learned a ton from you, so I appreciate it. I'm going to summarize. I've been taking notes here, so I'm going to run through sort of a quick summary of my notes. So we talked about the definitions of work-life balance versus integration. And work-life balance is this sort of rigid, kind of 50-50, very precise. I have to give the exact right amount of time to things. But there's a lot of problems with that. Work-life integration introduces the possibility of flexibility and fluidity that probably fits with our lives. One of the keys is that we have to be super intentional about it. And then it's going to look different for each of us. Your life looks different than mine. And so how we integrate things should look different. One of the keys to success is being intentional, but that requires you to really know yourself. So know who you are, what you want to accomplish, where you're going. You also should make plans to change things along the way. You know that's going to happen. We also talked about some of the emotions around work-life balance, this feeling of too much pressure. You feel guilty or you feel like a failure. Oftentimes that comes from adopting others' definitions of success. So stop and ask yourself which one. And then a call out for me is learn to let go, which I struggle with sometimes. And then our third section, we broke things down to sort of give you some mindset changes that you need to make and actions to do. So the mindset changes, define who you are and what you want. Recognize that it's not a 50-50 split. Allow some flexibility. Know that life can be hard. Know that work can be fun. And then come up with your own definition of success. And then the actual action items, write down your values, purpose, goals. Ask what area where your work aligns and your life aligns. Take a time inventory to see where you're spending your time. Move the important stuff into the times that you have control. Determine your non-negotiables and plan to change things up in 6 months.
Love that.
All right. So that's my summary. I'm going to give you a chance to summarize here. So rapid fire answers to our 3 big questions. So
Yeah.
this will be a little repetitive, but I think that's always good. So big question number 1, what is work-life integration? How is it different from work-life balance?
I think after all of this, what I'm going to distill it down to is that there are no rules and you have to make it work for your life, but it's deciding what your life is going to be and how you're going to integrate the vocation and the other things that fill your cup in whatever way you want. And there's no rules, but you just got to decide how you're going to make it work.
Excellent. Second one, why do we all struggle with this concept of balance in our lives?
Well, I think we're all operating from different pressures that we put on ourselves and different cultural rules and standards that we put on ourselves. And it's a tough life out there. And we got a lot that we want to fit in. And it's really hard to figure it all out.
Great. And then our third one, so what do we need to change about our thinking and our actions to create better work-life integration that leaves us fulfilled?
We've got to be intentional, we've got to be flexible, and we've got to be forgiving to ourselves.
Wonderful. All right. So we always like to give the audience a challenge or an action item to take away from this. And you set up a lot of really great ones in that third section where we talked about mindset changes and then behavioral changes. So I would encourage our audience, listen to that, write those down. That's your list of what you need to do eventually, but you are not going to do all of that at once. So let's go slow and steady here. And I think underpinning all of that is this concept of intentionality. So in order for you to be intentional about it, you need to sit down and define who you are and what you want. So I would encourage you, just like Andrea did recently, sit down, write out your values, write out your mission, determine what your purpose is and your goals. Because I think if you do that, the rest of this will will fall in place much easier. So that's going to be our challenge for the audience. Andrew, this was fantastic. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
All right. Our episode today was the struggle with work-life balance and why work-life integration may be a better solution. To our audience, thank you so much for joining us. Remember to live intentionally, consistently better. Keep striving to be the best human you can be so you can give your gifts back to the world and never stop optimizing. Thanks for listening to the Mayo Clinic Human Optimization Project. If you like this episode, hit subscribe and leave a review. It helps others find us. Know someone who might benefit? Share the episode with them to join us in our mission to help as many people as possible become the best humans they can be. Have feedback or a topic idea? Email us at optimize@mayo.edu. And be sure to look for us on Instagram, X, and YouTube.
This podcast is for informational and educational purposes only and should not be relied upon for medical, professional, or legal advice. Always consult with a qualified professional for any questions. The appearance of any guest does not imply an endorsement of them, their employer, or any entity they represent. The views and opinions expressed by the guests are their own and do not necessarily reflect the views of Mayo Clinic. Reference to any product, service, or entity is for informational purposes only and does not constitute an endorsement or recommendation by Mayo Clinic.